Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, one of my subscribers turned me on to this article in, this is in New Republic. It's called A Tough Love Letter to the Left. A new book urges activists to avoid insularity and purism and to focus on winning. I read this, and I have to say I agree. I would even go so far as to say it doesn't go far enough. Yeah, it's tough love. It's not put badly at all. It's just this thing of, you guys get in your own way. I think that's what it boils down to. It's how you are, your bearing, just how you're built in a sense. It interrupts your acquisition of your goals. Meaning there's certain things that you want to accomplish, but you have a hard time accomplishing those things because you have certain biases that get you to behave a particular way. Yeah, I agree. But there are caveats. So let me read the first two paragraphs first, and we'll talk about it as we go through it. In its final months, Hillary Clinton's campaign depicted the election in Mancian terms: the forces of light against darkness, love against hate, the guardians of virtuous public against a world historical bully. In this story, we lost the election not because we did something wrong, but because we did something right in a world that's wrong. We fought the forces of misogyny, xenophobia, and white supremacy. But they were too strong. They overwhelmed us. And how could they not? This is America after all. Yeah, that's essentially how she ran that campaign. Yeah, that's true. The left, especially the activist left, makes this mistake all the time. Alright, so one thing. Hillary Clinton is not the left. Hillary Clinton is not the left. If you're going to say in the final months of Hillary's campaign, and you're going to give this example of, you know, it was light versus dark and all this other stuff, yes. But you can't say the left, especially the activist left. I don't know what planet is Hillary Clinton on the left. For that matter, I don't know which planet the Democratic Party is on the left. The Democratic Party can't even tell you what the Democratic Party is. I don't know how you're defining them on the left. You're just talking about relative perspective between the two parties. Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're on the left. That just means they're a few degrees further a particular way. Ultimately, those parties are the same. There may be a difference in a matter of degrees, but the point I'm making is that matter of degrees is not substantial enough to call the Democratic Party the left. We don't have a left in this country. At least I don't think we have a left in this country. Yes, you can say relative perspective, but the point I'm making is any leftist candidate could be the reality show host, particularly in a populist campaign. You have a Democrat who lost to a blue-collar billionaire. Put that in terms. Put that in context. You have the party who's supposed to represent the 99% and couldn't beat a billionaire running in a campaign that was populist. That's an amazing thing. I don't understand how you can say that particular party is the left. They're associated with globalism, corporatism, all of these things. There were aspects of the Republican Party at first and are currently aspects of the Republican Party. People just recognize that the things that these guys were putting out for the most part is fundamentally the same. They're just a matter of degrees. Those degrees are almost irrelevant, at least to the overall structure of the whole thing. This is somewhat insane to me. It slightly annoys me, and this is slightly a tangent. It's just, you know, this campaign ultimately had the distinction of Hillary Clinton losing to a reality show host. And ultimately, in losing to that reality show host, she's not able to articulate any vision at all. And even at the point in which she lost, it wasn't, I did it. It was, oh yeah, there were all these other people who were racist and everything else. Yes, those people voted for Obama in 2008, but all of a sudden between that time they became racist. No, they didn't become racist, Hillary. No, it wasn't all this other stuff. What it boiled down to is, you had a presidential candidate who nailed this comment of hope and change. Literally, if you're going to swing Thor's hammer that hard, going from pillar to post, all across the country, screaming at the top of his lungs about hope and change, and you're going to give 95% of the new wealth to the top 1%, yeah, man, that's not hope and change. You can't say hope and change that way. You can't nail it that hard through your campaign. You can't say, I'm going to fundamentally change politics and then pass a right-wing healthcare bill that a month before that last election was going up by 50% in some states. That's not hope and change. That's business as usual. So yes, if people are going to see that business as usual, yeah, they're going to penalize the next party member who comes into that particular process. And that's even after being terrified with the caricature of Donald Trump that was created by the party. So yeah, let's not consider that the left. Let's not consider that the left. It may be a pet peeve of mine, but that is not the left. Alright, sorry, let's keep going. The left, especially the activist left, makes this mistake all the time, imagining there's some meaningful consolation in losing righteously. In 1934, Bertolt Beck wrote, "It takes courage to say that the good were defeated not because they were good, but because they were weak." A lifelong organizer and educator, Jonathan Matthew Smucker has been hearing versions of the story his entire life. In his new book, Hegemony, How To, A Roadmap for Radicals, he writes, I take no solace in the prospect of a history listing me among the righteous few who denounced the captain of a ship that sank. I love that. Being right about what is wrong in the world is no excuse for allowing the wrong to proliferate. I love that. I love that. I take no solace in the prospect of a history listing me among the righteous few who denounced the captain of a ship that sank. I love that line. It's like saying, yeah, it feels there is something satisfying to the ego about being right. But you're right about a sinking ship that you yourself were a part of. Meaning, yes, it's nice to be right. It's nice to articulate a problem. It's right to say, okay, there's an issue with that. But it's just as important to try to do something to mitigate that particular problem. I love that line for multiple reasons. It sounds amazing. Those of us who aspire to socially just world, says Smucker, must conspire to take the helm. Essentially, yeah, identifying a problem is not enough. Do you want to change that problem or not? Do you want to change it or not? Now, the advice that he's giving for the most part boils down to you can't be in your own little sandbox. Meaning you got to expand out beyond yourself. The left has a tendency to get into these enclaves of sorts. So you have these factions. Black Lives Matter, environmental justice, one thing to the next. It's like they have their own little teepees, their own little communities, per se. They're making this point of, yeah, you can't do that. That doesn't necessarily get you power, per se. That, for the most part, allows you to be cathartic. It allows you to, get your rocks off. But that's a different thing than trying to change the prevailing thought of a nation. And that's what he means by hegemony. It goes beyond this thought of a policy or a plan. It goes into what is the prevailing thought of a particular age? What is the Overton window? So put it in perspective. Imagine what a society would have to look like for a Republican president, Eisenhower, to say that if you're not on board with the whole New Deal programs, you have no right to be in this country. Something to that effect. That's an amazing thing. Can you imagine a Republican saying that today? No, you can't. Your head would explode even trying. But that was the hegemony of the day. That was the thought. That was the prevailing thought. This is the floor that this is how we see ourselves in a sense. The article is making this point of, if you want to change that, not just the policy, not just the rule, if you want to actually change how this country fundamentally sees each and every person in this particular society, you got to go beyond your own enclaves. You have to create groups. You have to create units. You have to create structures that utilize broad bases of power. Now, I said in the beginning that there's a caveat to that. Because ultimately, anytime you're talking about creating a broad coalition, you are talking in the sense of, what are you willing to do to get that? What are you willing to do to get it? What I'm getting at is, if you purify your idea, or if you distill your idea so much, not distill, if you dilute your idea, meaning in order to get other people to support your particular plan, if it's so diluted that at the end of the process, it's almost unimaginable from what you started, then yeah, there may be no point in doing it. So I put a caveat in that says, well, wait a minute, there are red lines. Even when there's this process of trying to get support and expanding beyond yourself, there are red lines. The question becomes the degree of that red line, if that makes sense. Being this awareness of what am I to be pure on and what are the things I'm going to compromise on. Because ultimately, that's the conflict that you're going to deal with when you're dealing with somebody on the left. we're different in this regard. We're like herding cats. That's the way I've heard it put. I'm talking about leftists. I mean, you have a situation like right-wingers. Right-wingers, for the most part, just fall in line. They see the alpha male, they go to that particular alpha male. It's just the way they're built. But leftists, in a sense, aren't exactly that way. For the most part, we're distrustful of power, just right off the bat. And not just distrustful of power. Look at the Tea Party versus Occupy Wall Street. Ultimately, both of those movements were focusing on, for the most part, the same thing. Yet still, you have one movement that immediately fell in line, took political power, and pushed through, yes, batshit crazy agenda, but pushed through an agenda nonetheless. The tail wagging the dog. You had the other group who was cathartic, who was making a lot of noise, who was banging drums and everything else. They were loud, they were in the way. But because they were so ideologically pure to this idea of we want a decentralized structure, it never materialized in anything political, even though the overwhelming majority of the public probably would have fell in line with some of the ideas that they were trying to espouse. That's the difference in those things. Your bias against the world, the way you perceive the world, to some degree blinds you to that particular reality of interacting with others, if that makes sense. The book is making this point that needs to be exceeded. I'm saying to go beyond that, though. Even this whole thing of social justice, you're never going to get people to believe your particular way of thinking. It's just not going to happen. Like, I keep saying that's an argument you're not going to win. It's the only way to win that argument is not to fight it. You try to find things that you yourself can align with the other people with. I make the case that that's not identity, that's class. I don't care if you like me. I don't even care if you need to understand my history or not. You can hate my guts. Just don't fuck me in the voting booth. Meaning there are things that you can come to some kind of common alliance with, but you're not going to be able to come to common alliance if you're trying to tell those people how to think based on your own value system. I'll give you a perfect example. Chelsea Manning. Personally, I consider Chelsea Manning a hero. She's amazing. I mean, in regards to what she was willing to do in order to try to get across this moral reason for doing what she did. That being said, you have some people who force others or get angry. It's like if somebody says he, meaning you're compelling the individual to say he. It's not so much that the person can acknowledge the other person, but they must also designate them a particular way. Now, in my mind, I agree that you should designate a person the way they want to be designated. That's fair enough. That's just respect. But am I really going to get up in arms for a person who doesn't necessarily believe that and who doesn't necessarily cater to that? And also, am I doing more harm than good by trying to force that person to do something that that person is never going to do? You're not going to tell a person how to think. What you will do is alienate that particular individual. I'm not saying completely disarm on all of this stuff. I'm making the point of saying there are battles that you're not going to win because those battles deal with how that particular person sees the world. And the very act of you trying to fight those battles is going to create resistance against those particular battles. That individual can be how they can be. Are there ways for you to create a broad base by pulling those people in on issues that you yourself have common heritage? Yes. Can you do that if you're alienating those people by trying to force those people to behave a particular way? No. No, they're going to resent you for trying to force them to behave a particular way. And there's another component to this that's problematic. And again, this is a contradiction built into it. If you're a political hack, then there's no contradiction here. You, for the most part, just try to get something accomplished, and you do whatever you need to do to get it accomplished. But if you're an activist, and you're to the point where you're getting up in the morning, and you're going above and beyond your typical tasks to actually do something because you care that much about it, by definition, you're in a sandbox on your own. There may be other people who are in your sandbox, but ultimately, you've taken well above the normal in the sense of saying, this is something I want to do. Your aims may be perfectly worthy in regards to what you're trying to accomplish. But now you have this other situation of what's right. Like, that becomes a factor in this question. Like, it's not so much as just you're trying to acquire power. Ultimately, if you're trying to acquire power, you're trying to make a broad base of support. You're doing something to get that broad base of support. Well, what are you doing to get that broad base of support? What are the deals you're going to be willing to make to try to get those people on your side? What are the things that you're going to trade away? Your conflict, particularly if you're dealing with the left in this case, is always going to be this idea of cosmic correctness. It's not so much that I'm taking a particular position. My position is right for all of these other factors. Yeah, but you can't communicate that to somebody else because they don't necessarily put that value on those other factors. Meaning the left, when it takes an argument, it takes an argument that it's a foregone conclusion that so-and-so is the case. I am making this case to you, and this case is perfectly right, and you should just accept what I'm saying because this case is perfectly right. As if being right had anything to do with changing political opinion. It has nothing to do with political opinion. You could say, yes, the climate is coming to a head. We need to do something about ecological damage. If that guy needs to put food on his table, he's not going to care about your ecological damage. It doesn't matter that you're right on this point. It's irrelevant to him. It's not within his reference frame. He cares about other things. The value to him is not there for him in the same way that value is there to you. The left persistently makes this argument all the time. It makes these cases of, well, this particular thing is important. I care about these people, and those people are broke, poor, hungry, they need health care, they're sick, whatever. As if the fact that they value those things and that that compassion is somehow ubiquitous to everybody else, and by virtue of having that compassion, that other people are going to see the correctness of it. They don't. You have hateful people, or people who are completely unempathetic in this particular world, who are not going to necessarily understand. They're not going to get it. I guess that's what I'm saying. I get it because I think that way. But at the same token, I full well recognize that a lot of people don't. They don't care. They don't care. They care about their own self-interest. Meaning any argument that you make needs to be cut through the guise, not of, I'm telling you this and I'm perfectly right, but this is the guise of your own self-interest that's involved in this particular process. The author is kind of making this point of, you need to go about doing this a different way. And in doing about it a different way, you need to understand that there are other people that you need to pull into this process, that you can't remain in your own enclaves when you're trying to actually take power. That for the longest time, just by virtue of being against something was enough. But being against something is not necessarily enough, or at least it shouldn't be enough, particularly if you want to be against something with results. Not so much, again, like the guy said, it's not about saying I'm right on a sinking ship. It's actually to take the helm of the ship. I agree. I agree. I just think that particular component of it is damn difficult to know. Meaning, what do you trade off? Because understand, this stuff is... I'll give you an example. So Sanders is working with the Democrats. At some point along the way, Sanders is following this model. He's thinking to himself, all right, I'm an army of one. I can't be an army of one and be resistant. So what do I need to do in order to get leverage, to be a part of something that I might be able to actually do something with? Okay, I need to work with the Democratic Party. Red flag, right off the bat. People who are his supporters, for the most part, drain away the closer he gets to the other party. So right off the bat, he has a contradiction between the model, the way he gets his power within, just in the confines of the way he gets his power, the way he gets his support, and the way that he needs to operate in order to utilize that power, if that makes sense. It's almost like you're stuck with the process. You can be pure and not get shit done because you're pure, or you determine the degree to which you're willing to murky things in order to get things accomplished. And even that gets murky. It's like, what are you willing to do to get something accomplished? Are you willing to do something that's somewhat morally murky if it accomplished the task that you're trying to accomplish, that you yourself consider to be a good task? Thus the ends justify the means. This is what we're back to. All of these things get into this particular debate when we're talking about purism and everything else. Because again, the left has this idea of cosmic correctness. It's not just, my argument is better. It's, no. It's a fundamental principle of the universe that I'm right. And because there's a fundamental principle of the universe that I'm right, if you don't agree with me, there's something wrong with you. You're being ignorant or something else. Essentially just pejoratives. That's not the way to win an argument. You don't win arguments by intellect, believe it or not. Arguments aren't necessarily won by intellect. You have two people watching an argument, there are going to be certain people who agree with the other person and certain people who agree with you. That's not always an intellectual thing. Oftentimes there's bias associated with that process. So it's not that straightforward of a, my argument is better. If your tactics aren't working to put you in power, maybe you need to try different tactics. And that's essentially what the article is making the point of. I agree. Again, I put the caveat in. At a certain point, though, there are lines. There are lines. I do have purity tests to some degree. Yeah, I don't want to end up in a situation where, I give you an example. A candidate runs up for election. Your particular candidate lost. Fair enough. The person who they're putting up is somewhat of a war hawk, and you know that person is probably going to start some kind of war and get into some kind of conflict. But the other guy he's going up against is absolutely grotesque. Am I going to put my vote in for that particular person? And mind you, the moment I give that person my vote, I lose all power whatsoever to have any sway over that individual, because I've just given that person my vote out of fear. Is it purism to say, well, no, I'm not putting my vote on anybody if they're going to kill somebody else? Does that mean that the Republican get in office? Fine, that means the Republican get in office. I am not co-signing this. Meaning there is a basic, fundamental level that I refuse to go, that I refuse to allow a party to descend into. Yes, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. I think it's perfectly adequate for a candidate to know, I'm going to be out on my ass, or I am going to lose this election to whoever they put up. They can put Satan himself on the ballot. I am going to lose this election if I take on certain tact that goes against a base fundamental level of integrity in dealing with the policies that I'm putting out. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. You can call it purism. I call it necessary. I call it totally necessary. Otherwise, you're just compromising for the sake of compromising. You're voting for Hillary Clinton again. I don't think you should have voted for Hillary Clinton. Now, so all of this becomes a matter of degrees of the author. What does the author mean when the author is saying compromise? What's the degree to which the author is talking about compromise? And what are the broad bases to which the author mean? All of these things get to be certain levels subjective. But I would say, I agree with the premise though. I do agree that this thing, if anything that you need to get done, you have to create a broad base of support. Meaning there are going to be certain things where you de-emphasize. There are going to be other things where you emphasize, because those things that you emphasize allows you to get closer to what you want. Yeah, that I agree with. The problem is the degree. At some point, that becomes this thing of, well, yes, you're now so diluted that the thing that you were trying to get is no longer there. But if you can somehow stem that tide, and you can somehow still pursue your ends, then yeah, I agree. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support the work through Patreon.